about this love, about this, about this love, about this love, love. How's everyone doing today? It's your host Dale Skinner with About This Love Soundbite, coming at you with another week of good topics. I hope you guys enjoyed the topics from last week. And again, I ask you guys to follow us on social media. On IG, it's About This Love, one word. On Facebook, it's About This Love, 211. And you can always follow us on our business social media as well. On Facebook, it's Multidimensional Media Domain, LLC. On IG, it's MD_LLC. And on Twitter, it's MD_LLC. Thank you for tuning in today. I got some topics for you guys. The topic for today is marriage after years of dating and children. And one of the things that made me want to do this topic is I seen someone had posted something on Facebook, and I began to have, just have conversations about the topic with my wife and friends of the weekend. So as I thought about it, I just really wanted to just discuss it on the podcast. Again, these podcasts are meant to, I guess to provoke people to a deeper thinking, but also encourage people as well. So for today, as always, I have 4 questions I want to ask, and I'm going to answer them with my opinion. And before we close out, I'm going to ask a question and hope that you guys would, answer it with the response on our Facebook page and Instagram as well. But the first question is, when should marriage come up in a conversation? When should the marriage conversation, when should it come up? The second is, why should I discuss marriage at all when thinking about dating someone? Number 3 is, what if I have children and have been dating my girlfriend and boyfriend for a while and have a desire for marriage? And the last question is reasons why someone would not want to get married. So I'll start with the first one. When should the conversation about marriage come up in a conversation? And the more I thought about it, I said to myself, well, I guess it wouldn't necessarily come up before getting to know a person. Meaning that if you've been seeing someone for, let's say, a week or two, might not be the appropriate time to talk about marriage. It may scare the person away, So I definitely would say not before getting to know the person, but then I also said that it definitely should come up before deciding to date or before deciding to get into a relationship with each other. It definitely should come up in a conversation at whatever point you guys decide, you know what, I've been seeing you for a while, you've been seeing me for a while, I like you, you like me, let's be exclusive, let's be in a relationship, and let's be committed to each other. And I feel like at that point, the topic should come up at that point, Second question, why should I discuss marriage at all when thinking about dating someone? And I think the obvious question to that topic, why wouldn't you want to discuss marriage, when dating someone? Now, I know for a lot of people, the question about marriage or the topic about marriage never really is on, on their mind when dating. I know more so it's on the mind and, of women more so than it is of men. Now, it is on some men's, minds, but it's not really on the hearts and minds of men as much more as it is women, and that's definitely understandable, because I was thinking to myself when someone posted on Facebook, they wrote a whole post about it, and I said to myself, I think when it comes to marriage, for men, it's not that men don't want to get married, but it's more so. I think a lot of men that I've spoken to who have long-term girlfriends have considered it more of a liability than of something that they would want to actually engage in. And that's unfortunately, that's unfortunate, it's unfortunate. But I think for me, it should come up because what if you've been dating a woman and or man for a few years, and one of you guys out of the two has a desire to get married, but the other one doesn't. Now, wouldn't it have been nice to know this before you've spent years, in a relationship with somebody? if you would have known this from the beginning, maybe you would have not, you know, committed to a relationship with them. I mean, maybe you would have, who knows? So I just think that it's always good that the question and the topic, be brought up, at some point, because if one of the persons in the relationship get married and the other one doesn't, it would be best that the person who doesn't want to get married knows that he or she that they're involved in want to get married, and vice versa for the other person. It would be nice to know for them to know that I actually don't want to get married. So from that point, they can make a decision. Do we still engage this relationship, knowing with each other once, or do we, go our separate ways? And I think for a lot of people, what I found is that oftentimes what people do is, and I've never quite understand this, me personally, but it's like they'll date someone who they knew from the beginning wasn't really a big fan of marriage. And then as the years progress and they have children and, begin to build a family, they're like, well, I want to get married. And like, well, so and so, you always knew I didn't want to get married. So it's nothing new, you know? So, I mean, I just never quite understood that. And vice versa, if you with someone and you do want that, why would you engage them, um, with a long term relationship and even children, knowing that they don't want to get married? I mean, at some point, do people's feelings change about marriage? Yeah, a lot of times, it does, but also a lot of the times it doesn't. You know, so I just think it's always good just to be upfront with whoever you're considering dating about the topic before you guys engage in a relationship, and then it comes out years later that, oh, I want to get married, or no, I don't want to get married. I just think that at that point it's unfortunate, especially if children are involved. Um, let's move on to the third question. What if I have children and I've been with my girlfriend and boyfriend for years and have no desire for marriage? Um, I mean, for me, I'll just put myself in it. I'll just say, hypothetically, if I was the person that was in a relationship with, let's say, a young lady, and she didn't want to get married, and we now have children, I think for me that would be it'd be pretty tough to deal with, because I say for myself, I am someone who, I am married, and I have always desired to be married. So that's why I put myself in that shoes to say, hypothetically, if I was with someone who didn't want to be married, and we of course have children, I think that would be a very, that would be a big, very big deal to me, to be with somebody who didn't want to get married. But I think again, I think putting the blame on myself, again, hypothetically, it would be my own fault, because I'm pretty sure at some point, knowing me, that conversation would have come up, you know, and knowing the conversation would have come up at that point, I would have had to decide what I want to do. Now, obviously, I'm guessing continue to move forward with the relationship, knowing the obvious outcome would be no marriage. And again, I I know a lot of people get married. I'm sorry, a lot of people get into relationships in hopes that the person would change their mind. But unfortunately, that's not something that I would subscribe to, because I think that when you do that, you're actually playing with fire, or you're like rolling the dice in a sense. 'Cause it's like, well, I know what he or she said, but let me just get with them in hopes that maybe he or she would change their mind. And I feel like, why live a life of uncertainty if you only have to, you know? But I also feel like, we live in a world where people actually do not respect or honor other people's decisions or opinions about things, especially when it comes to things like marriage. I feel like, if someone is openly telling you, hey, I don't desire to be married ever, you know, and if my mindset about it ever changes, I'll let you know. I feel like at that point, the person should, if they desire to be married, or if they're okay with that, that should be a done deal at that point. I don't think you should, years later come back and be like, well, no, I thought you would change. And no, I just, again, it's things that, if you desire to be married as a woman or a man, and you're with somebody who does not, have a desire for marriage, I think you should really go somewhere and just ponder and really think about that, for a moment before, if you are in a relationship with somebody, again, think about it. If you're not, then before you do that, or if you see someone who know doesn't want to be married, but you want to be married, but you like the person, again, think about it. You know, can you live with that? Kind of goes back to our last podcast topic. You know, can you deal with that decision? You know, I feel like oftentimes a lot of us we make decisions based off emotions, and later on we have to live it out. You know, in reality, and it's like, well, if I knew then what I knew now, I never would have done A, B, C, and D. You know, so I think for me, it would definitely be a very hard decision to it would be very difficult to have to decide what to do from there. It's hard when you have children into the mix and you guys have been dating for years, and at that point it's like, wow. But I mean, I would like to think what I would do is just probably bring the relationship, to an end, or probably just let the person know, I love you. We got children now. I would want to be a family. I would want to make it official. If you don't, if you don't want to do that, I can respect that, because you made that known from the beginning. But my hopes are that that you would reconsider because of what we have, at jeopardy. I mean, family, children, a long history of having a relationship, with the person. So I would hope that they would reconsider. But if not, I think that, knowing the person that I am, I would just move on. I would probably, I just, and that's one of the things that I respect about myself is that I've always been able to make the hard decisions, when necessarily not really wanting to. That's always been a piece of my character that I've always, thank God that I like about myself, is that I've always been able to make hard decisions when I have to, even at the cost of breaking my own heart. That's just an ability that I've always had, and I like to think it comes from God. Excuse me. But the last question, reasons why someone would not want to get married. Hmm. Well, like I mentioned earlier, I know for a lot of men and women, when you talk about marriage, a lot of people feel like when it comes to the part of marriage, it's great, but when it comes to the part of divorce, it's a very diabolical system as it relates to financially. Because I was reading something that was like, the divorce industry is like $100 million industry. So it's like, lawyers and the courts and the government thrives financially off of people getting a divorce. So for a lot of people, the reason why they would not want to get married is like, well, I don't really believe in marriage because I don't necessarily know if I can not not get a divorce. Which to me it's kind of a I think the individual would be living in fear, because I mean I just don't believe in not doing something because of the possibility that it could fail. It's like, well, yeah, I could lose my job, but every day I go to work. I could drive my car to work, as I know I commute an hour to work every day. I could drive an hour. I could During my commute to work, I could get into a car accident, but I still get into my car and drive an hour every day. It's like I just don't believe in living my life in fear. So I think for a lot of people, the reasons why they don't want to get married is fear, and also a financial liability if it comes to divorce. When it comes to divorce, you have to split your assets, a certain percentage of the middle, unless you get a prenup, which me personally, I don't necessarily agree with. I don't believe the majority of the people who are married do believe, in prenups. So that's one reason why, people could opt not to get married. I actually was reading an article and it says 41% of marriages in the U.S. end in divorce. I was like, wow. Wow. And I'll also leave a link to that article as well. It also mentioned that people who were together for a longer period of time before they got married had a 50% less chance of getting divorced than people who were together say a couple months to a year. They had a more higher rate of getting a divorce because the fact that the fact of the matter is that they didn't really know each other. And I'll put the article to that in the link as well if you want to read it. I thought it was interesting. I thought it was very interesting. Other reasons why people wouldn't want to get married. I put I was thinking people that I know personally who have had parents who have gotten a divorce, and because of that, it might have tainted their perspective on marriage. You know, they're like, when my mom and dad were in love, my whole life, and then they got a divorce when I was in high school. When I got out of high school, and if my mom and dad, can't stay married, and they were the best example that I had as a married couple, then I don't think nobody can. So it kind of taints their perspective of marriage. So that's why a lot of people, may not want to may not want to get married. Excuse me, drinking some sparkling water. But yeah, that's I mean, people feel like I've had no I've had no good examples of marriage. You know, for other people, they've never had a good example of a marriage. So in their mindset, why should I get married? What's the point of it? What's the benefit of it? A lot of guys feel like if I can sleep with a woman and live with her and we share bills, what's the point of getting married? We already, living like we're married. You know, that's why as a man, I actually caution a lot of women. I'm like, if you're really looking to get married, if you're gonna give someone the benefits of marriage without being married, why would they marry you for? Think about that for a moment. Because I paused on purpose. Think about that for a moment. If you're gonna give someone, whether it's a man and a woman, or a woman and a man, if you're gonna give someone the benefits of marriage without not actually being married to you, why would they marry you for? I'm getting the sex, we sharing bills, we living together. Marry you for what? Why would I want to marry you? You know? I mean, I don't necessarily agree with the mindset, but I also at the same time I understand what people mean. It's like, nowadays women and men, they want people to marry them, or they want that lifestyle. They want the benefits of marriage without actually being married. So I always ask people, why give someone the benefit of marriage without actually being married? Why? Do you think it would make them want to marry you? You know? And again, I think it really depends on the mindset of the person, because sometimes in a lot of cases I have seen people that I know personally who didn't have a desire to be married, and as they got older and children came into the mix, they actually did ended up getting married. I think my parents were together. I'll think I'll say 13 to 18 years before they got married. I think my parents, I was like 12, 13 years old when my parents got married. And my parents were together way before I was born. 'Cause my parents met when my mother had my brother has a different father than what me and my sister have. So my father, when he met my mom, my brother was like 5 years old, and I'm 30. My brother's in his 40s. So think about that for a moment. So that means they were together for a long time before I even came into the picture. So eventually he changed this his mindset about marriage, and they ended up getting married. Granted, at that time I was probably in high school. I think when I was 13, I was in ninth grade. So by that time I was in high school. But if you have the patience to wait 13, 20 years, and go right ahead, but if you don't, and if it's something that you want now, within your grasp, I would just say, when you meet someone, when you feel like, oh, this is the person, I would say go ahead and have the conversation. I would always tell people that me and my wife had that conversation way before we began to date. Once we knew that we liked each other, we had the conversation about marriage. And it's funny because my wife, she actually asked me, after we got engaged, my wife asked me. I don't really remember the way she asked me, but basically she asked me would I have stayed with her if she had no desire for marriage. And I told her, I said, well, to be honest with you, I was like, in my mindset, in my mindset I already had that I would be with you for like a year and a half to 2.5 years. And at that point, if you hadn't decided, I was just gonna roll out. And she was like, wow. I was like, yeah. I said, because, I always knew what I wanted, and I always tell people in life is short, I feel like my 20s flew by. I feel like I turned around and my 20s was over. So I tell people all the time, life is short. If you know what it is you want, go after it. You don't, unfortunately, I know when you're young, the mindset is I have all the time in the world. Unfortunately, you don't, you do, but you don't, you know, when it comes to relationships, they fly by, So if you are someone who desires marriage, I would just say go after what you want. If the person that you are currently with is not someone who desires marriage and you guys have children, I would say I would ask them again, and just let them know your heart, sweetheart, or so and so, babe, I really want to get married. That's my desire. And if they say, well, you knew from the beginning that's not what I wanted, or that's not what I want, then I would just say move on. And I know it's hard. I know telling someone to move on who has children and been in a relationship for a while, I know it's hard. I'm very aware of that. Especially when you've been with someone for years and y'all probably sharing bills, but it's like ultimately, it's like, if you don't follow your heart now, you'll live with regrets tomorrow. It would have only been due to your own fault. So I pray you guys enjoyed this episode. I pray that it provoked you, mentally, and I pray that it also encouraged you as well. If you're someone who's been with someone and the thought of the conversation never came up, I pray you guys would listen to this and now the conversation would actually come up. And I pray you guys, just share this, like us on social media, and share our material. As always, it's a pleasure. But I want to leave you guys with this closing question and statement. What are your feelings about marriage and why? How do you feel about marriage? And why do you feel what you feel about marriage? Like, because I gave a few examples of just people. I give a few examples of people having parents who were married and got a divorce. People never have an example of a good marriage, so they don't want to get married. So, just what are your feelings about it? How do you feel about marriage? Do you agree with what I said? Do you like what I said? If you think if you think no, I don't agree. Hey, share why you don't agree, or share why you do agree. As always, thank you guys for tuning in about this love soundbite. My name is Dale Skinner. Again, follow us on social media. IG, it's About This Love, all lowercase, all together. On Facebook, it's About This Love 211. And our business Facebook is Multidimensional Media Domain, LLC. Our business IG is MDMD_LLC. And our business Twitter is MDMD_LLC. Peace. About this love. About this love. About this love. Love.